Good afternoon, everyone. By my calculation, it's just on 2, so we will get this meeting underway. Can I start with the opening karakia? Are you going to pop that up on the screen? That's all right if you're not.
No.
Everyone knows the words. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hohu, te hei Māori ora. Excellent. Well, welcome to this committee meeting of the Te Awa Kairangi Hutt River Valley Subcommittee for whatever the date is today, 5th of August. I have an apology from Mayor Guppy, and just noting that Councillor Edwards is online. Does someone want to move that apology be accepted? Moved Councillor Duthie and seconded Councillor Hammond. All those in favour? Carried. Okay. Next, conflicts of interest. Does anyone around the table have any conflicts that they wish to declare? There being none, we will move on to public participation. So we have public participation from 5 members of the public, 2 of which are going to give their presentations online. Just for a reminder for everyone that public speaker has 5 minutes to speak, and then you guys will have 5 minutes to ask them questions. The bell will ring at 4 minutes and again at 5 minutes to alert everyone that the time is soon running out. And during public participation, but also around the table here from councillors, the standing orders do not permit any questions of officers during public participation time. So can I first ask Leslie Smith from the Korokoro Environment Group to come up to the table? So you need to use your microphone because of people online. So it's the right-hand button will turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Quentin. And I've brought with me my counterpart, Andre Oliver from Korokoro Environment Group. Excuse me, we've been asked to provide a short update on what our group's doing and our interest in the Korokoro stream. So I'll let Andre give you a little bit of background as to who we are, and then I'll tick off some of our current and planned activities. And I guess I understand that you've got a mandate related to flooding, so I guess you'll be most interested in our work that's happening around the stream floor, so I'll try and focus in on that. But I'll hand over to Andre, who active committee member, leads a lot of our pest control work around Korokoro and surrounds.
Thank you. Just trying to keep it within the 5 minutes. So Korokoro, it's a hill suburb in Lower Hutt, and the residential area began, the modern development of the area began in the mid-1900s. It has a significant history with Te Awa or other Taranaki whānau, who settled the region real early in the 19th century. The Korokoro stream for them and us was a vital water source, and the valley floor had been used to support cultivation and travelling routes for the residents from the Hutt Valley through to the harbour on the other side. Today, our leafy residential suburb is known for its native bush surroundings and access development regional park, and it has a strong community identity. KEG, or Korokoro Environmental Group, is a community-based volunteer organisation. We've recently gone through the process to become a registered society under the new laws or rules. We have an active membership with paid and non-paid members, and a committee of about 8 people. Recently, KEGS has shown played a strong leadership role in opposing some infrastructure projects that have threatened the Korokoro ecosystem, and we've talked about the incorporated society. So yeah, some of our mahi. Back in 2018, we started like a number of other community groups, our predator-free program. We have 160 traps for our small little suburb, and we've to date removed 950 pests. Recently, we've invested or begun working on pest plant control, and to date we've identified 47 locations with 6 different species and have a number of effective number of controls in place and effective treatments, with 11 having been recorded to date.
Yeah. Thank you, Andre. And so in addition to lots of our long-standing pest and weed control, and we've also got a history of doing revegetation work, our committee's recently pivoted its attention to the stream. Some of that was driven by the threat of having the Granada Cross Valley link cut through our stream, although the current proposal has it sort of skirting along the ridgeline. But that's certainly driven community interest in what's happening in that area. But rather than oppose what may or may not happen, we wanted to use the opportunity to strengthen our community connection with the stream. So we've been active down there with our Scouts group, with Mountains to See Wellington, doing plantings and working bees in the stream floor. So try and foster a positive relationship between our community and the stream and make sure that the beautiful asset on our doorstep is used well. As part of that interest in the stream, we've applied for a grant through, I'm not sure if you have a role, but we've had a grant approved to do some further revegetation work, and we've mapped out some areas towards the Cornish Street entrance, and the possible relationship to manage with flooding there is that there's a debris arrestor running right through the site, and a lot of probably low-lying, flood-prone type stream floor that we'd like to see regenerated. That will likely impact on flooding, so we'll be working through that with the appropriate officers for Greater Wellington when we start looking at planting plans for that area, which we kind of kick off this Friday with a meeting on site with some of the Greater Wellington team. So that's us. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome presentation, and thank you guys for what you do and your contribution. A trap network of 160 traps is no mean feat to monitor and manage. So thank you from this committee for the work that you put in. Any questions of these guys from around the table?
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much for the presentation. Just in regard to the stream itself, historically there used to be watercress in that stream. Is there any way you could work with GW to get it back in place?
I think there still is watercress in that stream, Tui. Yeah, and we've had a few walks up and down the stream with the Tents Trust as well. They're quite interested in incorporating some of the stream monitoring work we're doing back into their environmental management plans. So Te Karanga, their environmental officer that came up with us, was really excited to see the watercress there. There's also lots of eels, there's heaps of fish. We've done a bit of spotlighting with the team. If you go down at night and stick a torch in that stream, you'll see a little fish every square metre or so. So we're really excited about how much life is thriving in that
We've
stream.
done a number of baselines too to try and understand what the ecological value of the land is, or the stream. And so Mountains to See, and there was an eDNA sample was taken of the area. It would be useful for us to continue those things. They just take scheduling time.
A wonderful work. It's fantastic to hear that news. Thank you.
Any other questions? There being none, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us and for updating us on your wonderful work in Korakora.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the public participation, we have Alison Thwaite, who I can see is joining us online. I believe Alison will be talking to flooding risks in the Manor Park area. All the rules that I laid out at the beginning also apply, but happy to answer any questions, Alison. Otherwise, take it away.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Sorry, I haven't really prepared very much because I only found out about this meeting yesterday. But I first of all would like to thank Quentin Duffy, who has been a great support and actually alerted me to this meeting. Quentin took some time out to come and meet me and one of the other residents in Manor Park recently, and it was to do with the northern end of Manor Park being placed as a high risk of flooding in the Hutt City Council long-term plan. Now, that was quite a surprise to the northern residents of Manor Park. And so we started doing some research. And of course, we found a whole lot of sort of older documents from the Greater Wellington Regional Council about the flood risk living by the Hutt River type documents. So that's why I asked to meet with Quentin, because we also started to have some residents with their house insurances going up, and then also a couple of people that have now started to look to move out of Manor Park. The high risk flooding rating from the Hutt City Council was now listed on their LIM reports. Now, there is a real conflict between the risk rating from the Greater Wellington Regional Council, which has put Manor Park between low and very low, and then the Hutt City Council risk rating. So, yeah, as a community, we felt that it was very poorly communicated with us, with the residents from the Hutt City Council. And we wanted to find out what we can do to sort of like start building that up and getting more information and being invited along to these type of meetings so we have a better understanding of what is happening and what we can do. We also just recently, one of the other people that sat in with the meeting with Quentin is a homeowner here who owns an extra piece of land, which is actually right beside the stop bank. And they have now found out that actually, when they've tried to sell it, the person that was going to buy it went and did some due diligence. And of course, they received a letter back from the Greater Wellington Regional Council flood advisory team that that nothing could be built within a certain distance from the stop bank. So of course that landowner is going, well, I've now got a piece of land that I can't do anything with. So that's also a consideration that we wanted to find out, which is the best avenue that residents that could also, other residents in our area, that we can get some information for them. And that's basically all that I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Alison. So I guess there's two main issues that you're raising that I'm hearing. One was around difference in flood risk rating between what Greater Wellington has recorded versus what Hutt City has recorded in their long-term plan. And the other issue is around what you can or cannot do on your land adjacent to a stop bank. This isn't the forum right now for staff to answer those questions, but we'll make sure that staff follow up with you. And we may discuss the risk rating of Manor Park that's very much aligned to our papers today. So we will make sure that if there's an appropriate time to ask some questions, that we do that in that space. But regardless of whether we discuss it or not, we will make sure that we report back to you on those two issues that you've raised. Round the table, does anyone else have any other questions for Alison? No? So there being no further questions, we'll move on, Alison, but thank you for your presentation, and staff have noted your concerns and we will get back to you and follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, next on our public speaking order, we have Sue Pattinson, who is present with us today.
Thank you. Mine's going to be quite brief. Would this committee have any objection to me giving some of my minutes to Steve?
So it's 5 minutes per participant. and that's what I have recorded in the run sheet today. So
you would have an objection to my time going to Steve?
yes.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear Alison and the concerns that are being raised there, and these are just going to become more and more widespread as if these flood maps are not corrected. The committee is going to be dealing with more and more of this in the future committees. On to my presentation. On the 13th of May, I spoke to this committee about the review of the stream works and how that review should include public involvement. Instead, we see that the review is going to be carried out talking only with the affected property owners. What I asked for was a new steering committee that includes experienced, qualified community members who have thorough knowledge of the Pinehaven catchment. This committee is the people that are ultimately responsible. You are legally responsible for what is being done in our community. And you're legally responsible for the maps and everything else that's been produced. In particular, we have no confidence in Mr. Cole Christensen being on the steering group. And I qualify that by saying because he has previously stated the impact of future development on the hills will have little or no impact on flooding. This is a very dangerous and concerning and false statement, and it would be very concerning if this is what this committee still believes or still holds to. Stephen talked to some of this further. This review process needs to be stopped now. The flood model needs to be revisited now before any works go ahead, before anything goes ahead, from scratch. We have submitted numerous evidence, including false evidence that was published in email chains, case studies, numerous evidence that this flood map is false and facially flawed and includes a Guildford development in it. So what I'm asking this committee today is to stop this review process and to involve local public involvement who have the knowledge and the evidence to ensure honest flood maps that are honest, that are true, and protect the community and the safety of the community and protect the environment from harm and ensures that flood water is mitigated on site. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Are there questions from around the table? No, there being none, I will move on to Stephen Pattinson, who is the next presenter, and I understand you have a presentation.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity, Chairperson Connolly, councillors, council staff, and members of the public. Tēnā tātou. My understanding is that today the subcommittee will be deciding to recommend whether to A, continue with the structure works project that is currently underway, or B, replace the structure works project with a review of the Pinehaven Floodplain Management Plan. Greater Wellington staff are advising the subcommittee to keep going with the structure works project. The reasons Greater Wellington prefers this option are that it has a shorter projected finish date of 2029-2030 for completing construction of an alternative option for the remainder of the works, whereas replacing the structure works project with a review of the floodplain management plan will take many more years, pushing completion of the construction of the stream works out to about 2034 or 2035. Greater Wellington's and the steering group's view is that continuing with the current structure works project for stages 3, 4 and 5 will provide the level of service required in the current floodplain management plan, and it will leave the community exposed to the existing flood risk for a much shorter period of time. Meanwhile, says Greater Wellington, the floodplain management plan can still be reviewed. The Pinehaven flood model will be updated and can take into account the alternative stream works that will already have been completed by then, plus make any further adjustments that might be required, such as for the impacts of climate change. On the face of it, it sounds like a good plan to continue with the current structure works project because it is in the interest of the community to get the stream works done quicker. However, and it's a very important however, there is a risk involved in continuing with the current structure works project, namely, and quoting from your order paper, the existing modelling which the structural works project will utilise is considered out of date and requires updating, end of quote. Whilst this statement is seemingly true, it downplays the real situation. The existing 2010 flood model on which the structure works relies is not just out of date, but it's fatally flawed. Slide 1. You will recognise these photos. This is the site of the stream gauge where it was installed from 2008 to 2010, while MWH and SKM carried out the Pinehaven flood study for Greater Wellington Regional Council and Upper Hutt City Council. That red circle is around the staff gauge. That's where a transducer type water level recorder was located in the stream. It was removed in 2013 after just 5 years of operation, and there's a quote there from Graham Horrell, an expert hydrologist, regarding the closure in 2013 of this stream flow recorder. It is unthinkable that a key site for design purposes is closed, and a result of closing it has lost us 12 years of flow record. And the reason that I saw in the order paper today was because you didn't have the funding to keep it going. And yet somehow you found the funding to increase the budget from 10 million to so far spending 22.5 million with a projected 38 million still to go. That recorder should have been replaced, should have been left in place. Slide 2. I've marked on this photo where a 25-year level came to, the peak water level in a 25-year flood on the 8th of December 2019. It's that lower dashed red line just above the timber retaining wall on the side of the stream. That's the Pinehaven stream by the Reformed Church in Silver Stream. That is the height of a 25-year flood event, an actual 25-year flood event on the 8th of December 2019. Your flood level, is that 4 minutes?
Yeah.
Your flood level is almost double the height for a 25-year flood event. That's an actual cross-section of the stream channel at this point with the 25-year flow on the 8th of December 2019. That's your flood level for a 25-year flow. It's grossly exaggerated. And where is that water coming from? By the way, I got that level from Jacobs. It's coming, I can't talk about that. That's a culvert you replaced for $8 million that didn't need replacing. It coped with the 25-year flow on the 8th of December 2019. This is very important flood frequency curves that show that your flood model is grossly inflated. It's full of absurd contradictions. So what needs to happen is you need to stop this current project, structure works project, needs to be stopped now. You need to do the flood model properly with local expertise and knowledge. Because if you keep going with the current flood model, we're paying for Guildford's runoff. That's what that extra water is in that cross-section that I showed you. That extra water is coming from future Guildford development. We know that from the future case scenario that SKM did in 2010. They use the same rainfall losses as in the Guildford model, which means the Guildford model is already in the current flood model, the 2010 flood model that you're using for the stream works. In other words, it's false, it's fatally flawed, and you need to fix it.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Who from the committee has questions for Stephen Pattinson? There being none, we will move on to our next public speaker, but thank you very much for your presentations today.
I'd like this tabled with the minutes, please. I'll leave you a copy. Okay,
Finally, our final public speaker is Pat Van Berkel, beaming in from Upper Hutt. So Pat is going to speak on Old Man's Beard and pest plants in the Awa. Take it away, Pat.
Right. Hello, everybody. Yes, Pat Van Berkel with Forest and Bird and Pest Free Upper Hutt. So I just wanted to speak with you about the presence of Old Man's Beard, which is all over Upper Hutt, but well, not everywhere. We have been eliminating it from some areas, such as the escarpment between the Silver Stream Bridge and Moonshine Bridge. But there's quite a bit of it along the banks of Te Awa Kairangi, and that's what I want to talk with you about. And I went out today and took a few photos, and if with any luck, I'll be able to share that with you. I guess this is it. No, it's showing the whole lot. Can someone give me some guidance on what I have to press to? Let me try that again.
It sort of seemed to be working, but there was a whole presentation there if you jumped through to the slides that had photos.
I know what I'll do. I'll just start the presentation. How's that? Can you see that? The presentation?
No.
Okay.
I'm just conscious of your time slipping away, Pat.
Me too.
Perhaps you could send through the presentation to Democratic Services and they'll be able to circulate with the rest of the committee.
Okay, all right. Well, I was just going to show you a number of pictures. I'll just have one more go at sharing. Here we go. Yeah, how's that?
That worked. Good job.
Great. Okay, yes, so we've got a number of these pockets of Old Man's Beard, and in particular, I wanted to show you that there's Old Man's Beard. This is Totara Park over here. Can you see my my cursor?
Yes.
Good. So Totara Park here. Here's Te Awa Kairangi going down here, downstream. And we've got this pocket of Old Man's Beard along with the willows here. And down here at Moonshine Bridge. And then there are some other areas of Old Man's Beard, just for your information, but that's not what I'm primarily here to talk about. So here we are. You can see moving downstream, starting from near Totara Park Bridge. You can see the willows planted here, and there is Old Man's Beard. And there's Old Man's Beard. And more, and more, and more, and more, and more. These are all different locations. They might look the same. That's because Old Man's Beard looks the same everywhere. And you might recognize this little feature. And also next to the road reserve, that's State Highway 2 just up here. There's more Old Man's Beard there. I imagine that's not your responsibility, but you might like to talk with NZTA about it. And then at the 21 kilometre marker, if you're into running, and you look onto the other side of the river, There you can see a whole lot, sorry about that, whole lot of Old Man's Beard on the north side of Te Awa Kairangi. And moving down as I was driving along, quick snapshot through the window. Don't tell NZTA that I did that. And then down to Moonshine Bridge, Old Man's Beard up here. I think that's it there, certainly some round here. And another view of the bridge, more Old Man's Beard there. So that's basically what I wanted to tell you about. We can look at Keith George Memorial Park, but that's not alongside the river. Actually, I can't resist. I just have to show you this. There's heaps of it just near the State Highway 2. My request to you is that you do something about it, because the river is a conduit, and it is let's just have a look back at this map. Yes, it is bringing the Old Man's Beard down the river, and it will, with flooding and so on, it'll be depositing the seed on both sides of the river, and we will just get more and more Old Man's Beard. And of course, where does this Old Man's Beard come from? Well, in turn, it's coming from upstream, from the likes of Mankaroa Valley and Akatarua Valley. It's a slightly depressing picture, but if we don't get started on it and do something about it, the whole of Upper Hutt will be full of Old Man's Beard. We have a few volunteers who are working on it, such as myself, but it's too big a task for volunteers to complete it. That is my request to you, to survey, record where it is, plan to remove it, and remove it.
Thank you so much, Pat, and also for taking the time to go out and take those photos so we could see what you're talking about. Anyone around the table have any questions? Yes, Councillor Hammond.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, thanks for your presentation, Pat. How long ago were those pictures taken? Because down at Totra Park, there's some work going on as we speak, I think.
That was taken today. They were taken today.
Okay. Did you know the work that I'm talking about? How close is that to...
I did see some earthworks happening, but it didn't appear to me that they were going to be affecting all those photos that I showed.
Yep,
but that would be the purpose of going out there, doing a survey and recording just where it is, and then planning what to do about it.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Duffy.
Kia ora, Pat, thank you. You've obviously have experience controlling Old Man's Beard as a volunteer with community groups. How would you describe the scale and practicality of controlling Old Man's Beard along the whole Hutt River corridor without getting too depressed?
There are some, I think the Totara Park bits are doable, maybe a couple of person weeks. The bit at Moonshine Bridge, that might be a day or two of one person, or the equivalent. As you go further upstream by Harcourt Park and further upstream, there's more Old Man's Beard, but I haven't gone out and checked exactly how much it is. But there, the riverbank is quite precipitous, so you need to bring in people who are skilled in abseiling. So yes, there's quite a bit of work.
Can I ask a question of officers, Chair?
no. So that's not permitted during question time, but I did note that Pat had emailed me a bit of a discussion on Old Man's Beard, which I forwarded to officers, so I'll get officers to follow up and we'll report back next term, I guess, because I think this is the final Te Awa Kairangi meeting of this term. Any other questions? There being none, I would like to thank you, Pat, for your for your presentation, but also your ongoing commitment to tackling Old Man's Beard in Upper Hutt and along Te Awa Kairangi, and thank you for the photos that you've taken. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, right, that is the end of public participation. So we will now move on to the minutes. So just looking at the public minutes of the meeting on Tuesday, the 13th of May, does anyone have any concerns or corrections regarding those minutes? No? Would somebody like to move that they are a true and accurate record? Quentin and Councillor Laban? Oh, you're an apology, or all right, I'll pick on someone else. Who was here? Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Excellent. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the update on progress on action items. Do you? So we've got Jack here. Do you want to provide any context on those action items, or raise anything in particular?
No, I think the only matter I'd like to just draw attention to would be to draw Upper Hutt and Hutt City Council's attention to the Taito Rock item. Just noting that the concern we have there is primarily around the erosion with the sewage pipe. We've got a river geomorphologist on staff, and their early investigations suggest that there's overland flow issues there affecting it as well. And so we just want you guys to be really cognizant of the risk to that pretty core bit of infrastructure, and we'll follow up with Wellington Water and you guys.
Excellent. Does anyone else want to raise any items from that action list? Councillor Duthie?
Just briefly note the great progress in terms of the trail, a number of different items mentioned there in the follow-ups, and some good analysis to help us work out how to prioritise next steps in improving what is a big major asset, recreational and transport asset for the valley. So any particular specific questions I can follow up offline.
Excellent. Any other questions on the action items from anyone online? Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is the Pinehaven Floodplain Management Plan. So this is, at the last meeting, we asked councillors, so we asked officers the question of, given we were going to be re-looking at the structural elements of the Pinehaven Flood Management Plan, was it appropriate to start the review of the maps, given that they were programmed for review in 2026? So this paper answers that question. I'm going to hand over to staff to take us through and pick out anything that they particularly think we need to note. This paper doesn't have any recommendations, so it's just for noting, but happy for you guys to ask officers questions.
Thank you. I will take the report as read, but I thought it would be helpful to just highlight a few key points. So there are currently two processes regarding flood risk management for the Pinehaven stream. The first is meeting the objectives in the level of service set out in the existing Pinehaven FMP. This is being addressed by looking at alternative options for the remaining structural works, and details of this are covered in the paper immediately following this one. We consider that undertaking this work now is the most efficient way to meet the requirements of the floodplain management plan. The second process is regarding the review of the Pinehaven FMP. We know to inform this review, the flood hazard modelling needs to be updated, and we know to inform the modelling that a new site-specific hydrometric site should be installed, and time should be allowed for this data to be collected. When we have the site-specific data and the modelling is updated, which is expected to be a minimum of at least 4 years, the review of the FMP will then be undertaken to identify whether the objectives and the level of service are being met. We advise that these two processes proceed on their current timeframes. This is because the works needed to meet the requirements of the FMP should be prioritised. While it would be ideal to use updated modelling to inform this work, the process to update the modelling and complete the FNP cannot be expedited. The risks of implementing further physical works based on the existing modelling are largely financial, whereas the delay would mean that the community would continue to be exposed to the identified flood risk. It is a trade-off between the level of risk the community is exposed to and financial risk regarding the implemented works. This advice prioritises reducing the risk to the community. Thank you.
Okay, who has questions to start us off? Okay, I also have some, but I'll kick off with Councillor Duthie's question.
Yeah, a curious question of clarification from me. Sometimes when we do flood hazard modelling, we don't have anything. We're sort of starting from scratch, and other times we're reviewing. Is there a material difference in the process that's gone through? Is it like shorter and easier when there's an existing baseline of modelling to work off, or is it effectively starting the process from the beginning and running all the inputs and through?
Thank you, Councillor Duthie. Effectively, it's starting from scratch, in that we will follow the flood hazard modelling standard that's since the Pinehaven modelling was done back in, whenever it was, 2000 something. We've now got our flood hazard modelling standard, so we will need to be following that process, and we will be taking all the information that's available. So that would take into account the information that was used at the time, but also any new information that's been gathered and any new technology that's available to be used as well. So it wouldn't be a quicker process, but it would be making sure that we are taking into account all the information that's available, both historically and since the previous modelling was undertaken.
One more follow-up there. When we did the Waifetu stream modelling recently, it was sort of unique in that it was combining fluvial and pluvial, was it? Stormwater and river flooding sort of things together. Is that a similar case for Pinehaven, that it's a catchment that is affected by inflow from the stormwater network as well as the stream itself, or is it primarily one or the other?
That's probably something that we would look at a little bit closer in terms of how we would incorporate the stormwater once we've finished collecting that data, once we have the site reinstalled and we have the data collected. Typically, like you said, that was a bit of an exception to the rule, and taking into account stormwater is really important. How that's done within the modelling is a case-by-case basis as to what's appropriate for the catchment. In the case with the Waifetu stream, we worked collaboratively with Wellington Water at the time because they were also undertaking the modelling at the time. But as you know, we've actually ended up with two slightly different maps due to the hydrological inputs. So it would depend on what information was available and how the stormwater was interacting with the stream.
Any other questions? Okay, so I have a question around this flow monitoring site installation. So from what I'm reading here, there was a flow monitor between 2008 and 2014, but it was removed due to lack of long-term funding. But this paper says that we need that flood hazard modelling and we need that flow data in order to progress to the next stage of the flood hazard mapping. Can you explain that to me? I'm kind of baffled by why we would remove a flood monitor that was necessary for our flood modelling work. And I do acknowledge the fact that the public speakers have been raising this issue, and it does seem rather confusing to me that that was taken out of commission in 2014, and so we've gone a period now without that data, which would be incredibly useful. And essentially, the progression of the flood hazard modelling is going to be delayed until we get that monitor on site and have it recording for a number of years.
Kia ora. I'll field that one. Yes, it would have been handy to have that information. I think we can't, unfortunately, monitor everywhere at all times. We do need to prioritise resource. A decision was made back then to pull that monitoring out and redeploy it. And given the constraint that we're looking at the moment, these kinds of conversations around prioritising where we put our investment will be more and more common. So I would expect these are kind of conversations we need to have going forward.
we just simply don't have the resource to monitor all streams, all waterways to the extent that we'd like to. So it's a prioritisation question.
I think what might be quite useful in the next term of this committee, and obviously that's going to be up to the next term of this committee, but is if we thought about some advice to the LTP committee around, you know, if there is more funding required for flood monitors, the fact that we believe that that was money well spent in order of achieving adequate flow monitoring across the catchment, because it does seem like that really wasn't the best decision, and we would have been better served to have kept that monitor in place, and we're now paying the price of that. So let's just jot that in your back pocket for when we come up to LTP time again. There's no reason why we can't be recommending stuff to the LTP committee to think about. Because, I mean, I'm interested to know where else around the region we don't have flow monitors that you think we should have flow monitors, like in Wainuiomata and Stokes Valley. Like, where are the gaps of our monitoring data? Maybe that's not a question for today, but it just does raise those questions for me. Councillor.
Thank you. And on that same point, with the flood mapping and the picture that was shown by our presenters, there was 2 different levels. Was the highest level, where did that come from if we've had no data?
Thank you. Staff, can you provide us some information? Or if you can't, it would be useful if you could feed that back to the committee.
Thank you for the question. We'll certainly look into it when we do the next round of modelling as to where that information came from. We'll feed it into the next flood hazard modelling. Part of that will be an assessment of the hydrological previous events that have occurred, such as the one that was in the presentation. And so part of that will be looking at the rating curves and the all that sort of information that will go into the next round of modelling. I don't have a straight answer for you to your question, though. I'm sorry.
Just through you, Madam Chair, I think if I interpret your question correctly, and forgive me if I'm wrong, we did have a flow meter installed that informed modelling for the original FMP as it was developed, and then the monitoring tool was removed and put elsewhere in the region where we needed it. So there was data collected for a period, and the question is, should we have kept that gauge in right up to the present day, so we could have had continuous data rather than put it in, take it out, put it back in.
So just to clarify, I guess the overall gist of the paper that's in front of us, essentially we asked officers to look at whether we should bring forward the date of the flood map review, and essentially we're told no for a couple of reasons. One, the flood mapping takes quite a long time and the community would be exposed to flood risk in the interim, and 2, we need to install the flood flow monitor so that we have a couple of years of data before we can start the exercise. Is that a fair summation of where we're at? So as I say, this paper doesn't have any recommendations, but is everyone comfortable with that conclusion? Everyone online comfortable as well? Excellent. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next paper, which is kind of like the sister of the first paper, which is looking at the floodplain management plan. A couple of things I'm wondering if you could answer. Just the process at which we are going to, so it talks about people that are going to be engaged as part of this, and if you could explain a little bit more, because I understood there was going to be a drop-in session as part of the structural works review. And yeah, also the decision to stop the plan as it was and look at something else has already been taken by this committee, and that decision has been endorsed by the Environment Committee and by Greater Wellington Regional Council. So this is just an update on where we're at with this, not a decision paper.
So just to give a bit of an update on where we are with engaging with the affected community. So the focus, excuse me, has been talking one-on-one meetings with people who are directly affected by the works. And so, this time last year, they were expecting
bridges and concrete line channels through their property. So we're now coming to them and saying, well, that plan is sort of on hold. We're exploring more cost-effective solutions, which do include potentially purchasing the property. And some people are very glad to hear that because they currently experience frequent flooding of their property. So that is a relief for some. Others that are haven't experienced direct flooding, but their access is sort of causes the flooding. So their actual dwellings are out of the flood hazard, but their current structure contributes to the flooding. Have sort of different perspectives on that. So it's been very useful, and we are continuing with that. Our first priority is talking with people directly affected, and then the plan is to reach wider into the community as we progress. So that's in terms of the community engagement at the moment. We're also working on developing this more natural option, which in basic terms is removing structures from the stream rather than putting more structures in. And the structures we're talking about removing are private access bridges and other sort of peripheral structures that are currently in the stream channel. And to remove those obviously means there's no more access to those dwellings. So it's largely around removing structures, opening up the channel with strategic property purchase. So that's the naturalisation option we're looking at. We're also considering an option which is more of a sort of a do minimum option, which would see enhanced maintenance, maybe purchase of one or two very key strategic properties, but not the full sort of suite that we're looking for. So we're in the process of further developing those options, testing them in the hydraulic model to test their performance, and focusing on at the moment on engaging with people directly affected. That's the sort of the information and update that providing to the committee, but very happy to answer any questions.
But you can confirm, as it says at paragraph 13, that wider engagement with the community is also planned. So there will be an opportunity for other people who aren't necessarily one of the properties affected to participate in this discussion.
Absolutely. That is the plan. We have a comms plan that lays that out. But as I said, the first priority is people directly affected. And so we thought it was just absolutely essential to do one-on-one, face-to-face communication with those people because they are most significantly affected, particularly if there's uncertainty around their property. So uncertainty in terms of a large-scale physical works that were sort of in the books to be done in the next 18 months versus now potentially their property may be purchased as part of an alternative option. So
Cool. My only comment on this paper was just at 8 you outlined the options 1, 2 and 3, and they're quite binary isn't the right word because there's 3 of them, but they're quite kind of distinct options, and I guess I was just looking for you to say, well, actually, we're prepared to kind of look at a merge. Like in some instances it may be that we want to do a bit of structural thing, and in some instances we want to do something more nature-based, and you'll look at kind of the suite of options that includes the various tools we can use rather than it having to sit in one of those 3 categories.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty with the structural option is it's expensive, and that's the reason why the works are on hold. So even looking at a shorter section of a structural option, so the properties that we were talking to last week, the works through there, affecting 3 properties was about $15 million worth of capital works for a bridge, concrete line channel. So sort of breaking it up into bits wouldn't really get the benefits in terms of reducing the overall cost. So I suppose it is binary in terms of the very structural, more structures in the stream, bridges, concrete line channels is that is designed and there's a cost associated with that as the works that have been currently put on hold. There is definitely some scope in terms of the details of what the natural option looks like, but I think conceptually it's there to achieve a more natural option. So with under that umbrella, we're not going to be adding structures to the stream. We're going to be taking them out. So I think in terms of the scope of that option, it's sort of defined, but there is some flexibility in terms of what it looks like. But it's certainly not adding structures. The third sort of do minimum option is probably where there's a little bit more scope for some sort of flexibility or consideration. So, and that could be, there's one or two properties that are very badly affected by the current flood hazard and have, structures that significantly constrain the stream and cause overflows to other parts of the community. So there could be some strategic structural works in terms of, okay, we know there's a structure that doesn't perform as we want it to, and it causes overtopping to the wider community. There could be an additional, overflow structure or something put at that point. So I think that if, in terms of sort of flexibility of scope, it's that sort of do minimum, which has some of that, I suppose, opportunity for adding some of the things you're talking about.
Can you just remind me of the kind of time frame you're looking at to, I guess, work up the feasibility of option 2 and or 3?
So we're currently just working through modelling of those scenarios, just to test where we can get to in terms of providing the FMP outcomes, and that's providing a 25-year channel capacity and reducing flooding for the 100-year. So we're still working through that. The aim is to have those options developed at a concept level within the next few months, and then develop them in enough detail that we can then understand the costs of those options. And then we'll be running that through a cost-benefit analysis to say, well, this is the costs of these options, these are the benefits in terms of the reduction in flood damage that we can provide, and that would run into the start of next year, and we're aiming for sort of mid next year for a decision paper back to this committee on here's the options, here's the analysis we've done, here's the numbers around those options.
Excellent. Who has any other questions? Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 1 in 100-year flood, how many houses are affected as of now, and where are they? Are they Tapestry and Willowbank down there, or are they further up?
The flood hazard does affect houses across the whole catchment, and it's also recognising that the current works don't remove flood hazard from the whole catchment, so there's still residual flood hazard even with the works complete, even with the full suite of works that was previously proposed, because at the bottom end of the catchment the stream goes into 2 pipes, and there's always going to be risks around blockage and overflow around those pipes. So yeah, the numbers are, in terms of dwellings, there's the stuff, the basic sort of process that comes in around Birch Grove, and then it's constrained, goes overland, and then floods a number of dwellings there, and then breaks out again further downstream and floods dwellings. But yeah, I can't off the top of my head give you the number of dwellings in a 100-year versus a 20-year event, but we can certainly provide that information for the next meeting. And it does also depend on what scenario is being tested in terms of the blockage allowance for the structures. So there's sort of a base scenario of a certain number of dwellings being inundated, but then as soon as you add in any accounting any blockage of the key culverts or the numerous structures, then that increases because you've got constrained stream environment, which creates deeper and faster flow out into the floodplain.
Any further questions? No. Well, as I noted at the beginning, this was just for noting, just an update paper. So thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to receiving a decision paper, I guess, middle of next year, but it would be quite good to have an update somewhere between now and then.
Yeah, the intention is to certainly provide updates as soon as we have information, and we're providing regular updates to every meeting of this committee.
Awesome. Okay, we will now move on to our next item, which is our annual favourite, the Flood Asset Assessment Report. So Lucy, you're going to come up and tell us about this. Just while Lucy is taking her seat, can I say that last year, I think it was last year or the year before, can't remember, I'm losing track of time, that we had a few developments we identified things we wanted differently in the Flood Asset assessment report, and it is really good to see that all of that feedback has been taken on board and reflected back to us. So, what would you like to tell us about this report before we get stuck into questions?
I'm just checking that's on. Yep, brilliant. Thank you for your feedback. That gives me confidence that I'm not about to overwhelm you with the wealth of information I'm about to give you. So hello everyone, Lucy Ashford, and I'm here to tell you about the annual asset management condition report. So just before we get into the detail, I'd just like to, here we go, highlight the key risk assessment process that we undertake using our condition information and how that gets to that risk assessment. So I'll just briefly run you through that. So we inspect the condition of our assets annually. Once the inspections are complete, we undertake a risk assessment process, and this is outlined in the asset performance framework, and it has two components. So there's the one on the left on this slide, which is the code of practice, which is essentially a 50-page guideline document that discusses the theory behind the asset performance assessments, and includes a brief how-to section on the performance tool. And then the tool is the image on the right, which is essentially just a risk-based spreadsheet tool. Essentially, we break down the river into segments, and within each of those segments, we calculate the risk. And that's comprising assets, condition information, the river geomorphology, engineering factors, and all of that comes together in our risk profile. So, moving on to how all of that works. This is basically the risk assessment process we go through, and it is all around the combination of the probability of the asset failing measured against the consequence of if it failed. So to give you an example of a stock bank, what are the consequences if it does fail? You know, what people, property, critical infrastructure are at risk. And so we can measure the probability of failure using our knowledge of the asset, its condition, and the strength of the structure, whether the structure has enough capacity and predicted flood levels. So here's an example for you that's on the Hutt River scheme. So the orange lines running perpendicular are the cross sections, and we space them out between 100 and 200 metres. That's how we break it into segments. So for probability, the performance criteria is broken down into capacity, intrinsic strength, and condition. And the capacity, we're assessing the probability of the flood overtopping within that segment. And that's at a specific flood level, depending on the level of service. For the intrinsic strength, you're looking at the possibility of the segment failing because of structural strength. So if you have a flood wall, for example, structural strength of the flood wall. And for condition, again, that's the condition of the asset. So for consequence, again, pretty self-explanatory. What's the consequence if it fails? An important point to note is that just because one segment might be a high risk, it does not mean that the one next to it would also be, because each of the segments are done individually. And once you have that, it all runs through that risk matrix that you can see there on the right-hand side. So here's an example of one that is very high risk, but obviously on the other side, it's not rated as the same, and that's because, as you can see, the consequence of that one failing is not as high for people, property, and critical infrastructure. And then, yeah, this is just to give you an example of the fact that it's not always consistent. You know, it wouldn't be consistently very high across all of the segments. So what are the benefits of using this tool? To be honest, obviously I'm hugely biased, but I think it's fantastic. It is really great that you can link it spatially. So obviously using GIS, we can present this on a map, which is much more digestible than me realistically giving you a bunch of numbers. So risk communication is the top one. Work program prioritization, we use this to work with our ops teams to make sure that the areas of highest risk are addressed. Obviously we can identify potential failure modes. So if you do have an area of very high risk, what are the condition of the assets? Can we change that? And obviously can identify critical assets. So that was a very quick rundown. So I'm now going to get into the detail. I'm sure you're all on the edges of your seat. So the overall condition trend for the Awa Kairangi, Waikato and Waianui Amata schemes shows a general trend of consistent condition of the asset base. That's 85% of our assets are in very good to moderate condition, which is fantastic. So to give you some of the nitty gritty, 41% of the assets, that's 943 of them, were assessed as being in very good condition, and that's a slight improvement from last year, which we'll take. A further 32% of the assets, that's 734 of them, were in good condition, which is unchanged from the previous year, also great. Moderate condition assets accounted for 13%, so that's 294 of them, and that's broadly consistent with previous years as well. So the proportion of assets in poor and very poor condition in 2025 actually decreased slightly to a combined 8% compared with last year's 9%, so again, we'll take that. And there are 27 assets assessed as very poor, which, like last year, and most of these were actually comprised of our vegetative assets, so that's vegetative defences and debris management structures. So they're generally our first line of defence assets, and I suppose they're the ones that we know we're going to have to do the most maintenance on. They're the ones that we expect that forward replacement requirement. So that's, again, fantastic. That's not news to us. We've planned for it. So approximately 6% of the assets, that's 143 of them, are classified as to be determined, which actually refers to assets that we either couldn't inspect for whatever reason, or we couldn't finalise those inspections. So it is a slight increase from last year by 1%, but it's still a huge decrease since 2023 when it was 13%. So we just need to keep that trend low. So we'll just carry on working on that. So this slide shows a summary of the 2025 asset condition rating, as you can see. So overall, the 2025 results demonstrate a stable condition profile, with 86% of the inspected assets assessed as being very good, good, or moderate condition. So this, in summation, provides us with continued confidence in the ongoing performance of these assets and the overall asset base as contributing to our flood risk management process, which is great. Now, I'm sorry about this table, there's a lot of information on there, and it is provided in the report if you did want to go in and look at this a bit more closely. But essentially, this is that breakdown by asset type. And I'm going to go into it in a bit more detail over the next couple of slides. So if we take a look at those assets in poor condition, this is the assets by type in poor condition. A total of 194 assets, with 167 in poor and 27 in very poor condition. So the bulk of these, again, as I said, are debris fences, willows, and that vegetative work that we do. And all of this is being considered in the annual works plan with the operations team. That it's all in planned maintenance and replacement costs have already been identified. And to be honest, this is just a great example of our asset life cycle working, because we've already identified them and we'll be working on it. So again, great. So this table takes a little bit of a closer look at the poor and very poor condition assets, and we've added some commentary on the right-hand side for you guys with the reported issues. So in 2025, there were 30 stock bank assets recorded in poor condition, which is actually consistent with previous assessments. And the most common issue is actually related to invasive trees being too close to our stock bank, generally invasive vegetation, scouring, erosion, and slumping. So Greater Wellington in general take quite a conservative approach to the way that we record our vegetative encroachment on stock banks. So anything within 5 metres and we can record a defect, which is quite a conservative way to do it. So we're actually refining this process and updating our guidance to support our inspectors to sort of make better decisions around whether will we actually take that out, we'll take into account the height of the tree, different factors. So we're hoping that this number will, by next year, will decrease, and we'll be, again, looking at that process, because in some cases, perhaps we're being overly diligent.
That was going to be my question around this data, was the fact that, overall it's a very good picture, and it's picking up from where we were last year, so that's awesome to see. But at the end of the day, we have 46 critical assets that are in poor or very poor condition. Now, you mentioned that particularly the ones in very poor condition were all in the maintenance schedule, so should be sorted out. So I guess my question was, next year, I don't want to see any in the very poor. I don't want to see any critical assets being recorded as very poor, and only a small number, i.e. under 5%, recorded as poor for critical assets. That's kind of my expectation. Do you think that's doable?
It's a great question, one that I might have to pass over to my
to me.
to Jackie.
I think we can expect just with assets in general that they will always be in a period of requiring maintenance. The degree of maintenance, I think, is what could drive the condition. I think in terms of setting expectation, I think we will always have assets potentially sitting in the very poor. I think the focus should be on moving that, but looking at the criticality of some of these assets and going, we really don't want stop banks sitting in that very poor. Some of that will be related to our capital works program, though. There is only so much you can do from an operational perspective.
I guess though that's what we asked for, and that's what I thought we got. These are all critical assets, whether they're stop banks or not.
Yes, yeah, they are all critical assets, but it's in terms of setting your expectations about is it realistic to say that we can maintain all assets above, beyond poor and very poor into that good to very good. So I think we will always have assets sitting in this range, but the key point here is that we know about them and we're maintaining them. These will change over the years. We will have some different stop banks or different rock lines coming into these categories. It's just it's how maintenance works. It's how rivers work as well. So it's just how we respond to that from a maintenance work program.
I guess so. My expectation is that there would be no critical assets in very poor condition.
Yes, yeah.
And if we don't think we can deliver that within the current fiscal envelope, that's the kind of thing that we need to be told, so that we can deliver better funding, so that we can make sure that's a reality. I've got a couple of other hands around that. Quentin, do you want to speak, and then Jack can follow up?
On the same theme, I guess what criticality means is important here, because a stop bank or a riprap might be a critical part of the flood protection scheme, but whether the actual reason that it's in very poor condition prevents it from doing its job or not, that's the real criticality. Like, is it very poor condition and a critical asset mean it will fail or not? Or does it just mean it's got a rock missing and it will still work? So I wonder if there's something missing in our definition of criticality. There's a difference between the asset being critical to the functioning of the flood system versus the defect being critical to its ability to perform when it gets hit.
Absolutely. I think my next point that I was going to make, which to be honest, you've just hit the nail on the head, is that a lot of it, prioritisation goes into whether these critical assets sit inside the very high and high risk. And I think it's about refining the way that we do asset management, our inspections, and also our prioritisation processes. So I completely agree with you. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's something that as we mature, you'll definitely see more and more of. Does that give you any confidence?
I could just add a couple of points to support Lucy there, Madam Chair. One is just around the criticality. We have created definitions of what these different conditions mean. There is only a 1 to 5 scale, so there's an element of discretion in there. It's worth noting there are councils around the country, for instance, that don't consider trees within stop banks to be a major issue, but we've taken that view because we see there's a high risk of piping failure and catastrophic collapse. So around the country, we would say, and there's some evidence to back this up, that we're in the top 20-30% of regional councils in terms of our asset management systems and processes, and we take a more conservative approach. And so part of that is why the numbers have come up. In terms of a percentage target or a 0%, the practical experience is you always want to allow a couple of percent because it is a rolling front. We will always be uncovering things that need to be addressed. So our goal should always be to aim for 0, but accept there'll be a percent that sit in that category. And I have asked Lucy and her team to specifically look at what I would term as stale work orders. So while accepting that we have a number that are going to sit in these categories, what we should be able to demonstrate is that we're aware of what the issue is and we have plans afoot to mitigate it, whether or not, if it's not fixable, that we're aware of it and we're working to make it fixable, and where it is fixable, that we know what it is and that we can report back on the timeliness of that. So you can have confidence. A very poor asset might be under 6 months, or it might be 6 to 24 months, and then if it's over 24 months, then you can give us a rocket. And so that's a work in progress that Lucy's talking to her team about.
Shall I continue? Okay. Okay, so this slide actually just shows you the overall risk map of Te Awa Kairangi. So the poor and very poor condition assets have been highlighted with some points that show the risk ratings alongside the profiles, which are the blocks of colour, and there's some spots which show you those poor and very poor condition assets. So some key points to note from this is that the assessments indicated 75% of the segments, so 249 of them are assessed as very low risk, so that's consistent with your 2024 results. A further 170 segments are classified as low risk, with 59 rated as medium. So notably, the proportion of segments classified as high risk, there's been a slight increase in the 2025 compared with the 2024. So the number of segments with a very high risk rating has reduced to 28 segments from 36 in the previous year.
Are you, sorry to interrupt,
No, absolutely.
Are you able to, off the top of your head, identify what the risk rating is at Manor Park, just for our public presenter? If not off the top of your head, just if we could note following up with that.
I'm trying to find it. Yeah, sorry, I can't zoom. I knew I should have brought my laptop. Can you see?
I can, because I had a look into it.
Oh, brilliant.
Meeting with the
Thank you very
constituent,
much.
because it is challenging for the public to understand the difference between the condition and the risk. So in the Manor Park, there are 4 assets there listed as in poor condition, and yet the risk rating is low, it's blue. So it's a separate issue as to what the district plan might be classifying the flood risk at versus this. But in terms of the actual condition and the risk, Manor Park is considered low risk at the moment, and therefore the works in the FEP for there are deferred into the future relative to things like Riverlink, where the risk is extremely high. So understanding that assets that are in poor condition and therefore look like they need fixing versus the actual risk being a different thing, that has been a challenge for us as a committee, and it's a very interesting challenge to communicate publicly. So I will continue talking to our constituent.
Well, also, I wonder if you could touch base with maybe Councillor Shaw or someone from that part of Lower Hutt, so you can actually delve into the mismatch between the two bits of information, because that will be gnarly to sort out.
Absolutely.
But one more further thing on that, I was interested to in that situation where there is private land basically on the stop bank effectively runs through the private land, and it has a tree within 5 metres of the stop bank toe on someone's private property. So how often is it that we can't meet a poor, improve our condition, fix the problem, because it's not actually our property, even though it's our asset that we're trying to maintain to a certain standard? Is that a common thing, or is that a really uncommon case that there's someone basically owns a stop bank? I have no idea how that could have happened.
It's not the most common, but I wouldn't say that it doesn't happen. Obviously, because you've just given us an example. In areas where we do have situations like that, obviously we look at that overall risk profile and we say, okay, is the flood risk being mitigated to the acceptable requirement? Are we satisfied with that? And obviously there are agreements that are in place depending on the situation. But it's not the most common, but it does happen, absolutely.
So online, I've got a question from Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you for that, Madam Chair. Just speaking about this mismatch of information to do with the Manor Park, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's a flood risk noted on a limb in our district plan, it's based entirely on GWRC's flood mapping, risk assessment. Am I wrong or right about that?
No one is putting their hand up to volunteer to answer that. Oh, yep, we've got an answer.
My understanding is we don't have flood hazard information for the hut in the district plan because of the high level of flood protection that exists.
Maybe I speak that.
Yeah. Well, Francine might like to, I'm looking at Tracy and Francie. This is more a planning area than a asset management area.
So I'm sorry. So no, we do have flood hazard maps for the hut.
For the hut,
yep,
yeah.
We do, absolutely.
In the district plan?
Yep, they've recently been updated and been provided to Hutt City Council for their district plan. We're talking about Upper Hutt.
No, we're talking about Manor Park.
So the question, I don't know whether you were here for public participation, but a lady, Alison, I forget her name now, Thwaites, was that it? She presented on a couple of issues to do with Manor Park, but one was the fact that she has identified that on the limb there's a very high flood hazard, but Greater Wellington has given her property a low rating, which has just been confirmed by staff here.
Yeah, so the flood hazard rating is different to the asset rating, for one thing. And in answer to the question regarding is the only flood hazard information that are on limbs related to Greater Wellington, the answer I believe is no. There's also stormwater related flood hazard information, which is provided by Wellington Water through Hutt City. So there are two different sets of flood hazard maps that go together to create the flood hazard layer for the Hutt City Council. So where Greater Wellington might have one particular rating based on our flood hazard maps from the Hutt River, there may be something different applied for the stormwater. In terms of Manor Park, I'm not familiar enough with the location.
So it sounds like we may be getting to the bottom of what is sitting behind this, but still, I really appreciate it if you guys could pick this up and delve a little deeper, because it's really hard. Well, it's hard for us to understand how you might have two different risk ratings on the one property. So it's really hard for punters to follow.
Chair, could I sneak in one other question?
Yes, absolutely. And then Councillor Lee.
It relates to paragraph 72, where we talk about climate change risks. And just when I think I've got my head around the level of protection that we're going to have with Riverlink, it seems to me like a new set of measures are described. So I had it in my head, and when I describe it to people, we will have protection in a 1 in 440 year event with an annual exceedance probability of 0.23. But now there's a whole lot of other ways. Is what is in paragraph 72 the same way of describing what I've just described? And additionally, I thought we used RCP 8.5, which I thought was the worst case scenario, but now it's stated that we use RCP 6. Can I get some clarity?
1 in 440 years, so I hope we've been accurate. Can someone elucidate?
So I would have to go away and check that, because I'm off the top of my head, I can't be entirely sure. But to my knowledge, what I have in this report is the correct information. I can go away and certainly check. So can you just tell me what it is that you guys? Yeah, we can. Just this one. Can I just read it?
You've obviously raised a very good question, Councillor Edwards, because sort of flurrying to work out what the situation is and what is correct, and whether that is the same as you and I have been telling the public. So I'm not sure whether we'll get an answer for you today, but we will make sure that's followed up in a subsequent.
No hurry. I just don't want to misdescribe it to people who are very interested in Riverlink during the election campaign.
Fine. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Lee's question, but I think staff are furrying away in the background to try to answer your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I love the graphics because it makes someone like me, it's really simple to look at colours and whatever. But being a risk management nerd, in my previous life I did do a bit of risk management. Do you think that there's a possible confusion from especially the public, because there is a confusion or misunderstanding between what is risk and probability, because everyone thinks that risk is actually probability, but which is not, is it? Because it's the probability of something happening and the consequence of that event happening. So do you think that there could be some confusion there between risk and probability?
Yes, I completely agree with you. Obviously, that's why we have that the code of practice at the start, where I've outlined all of those tables. But obviously, it is definitely something that takes a while to get your head around. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Because something which could be blue or green could be for a landowner a red, because they've confused the two. So how do we get that message across?
good question. Might be a little bit outside of the remit of my report, but definitely something I can go away and consider how we could. I mean, are we looking at how we could better translate these maps for public consumption? Is that the question? Yeah.
Oh, it's really to cover our behinds in case, if something happens, then they'll obviously blame us, isn't it? If something goes wrong and their property, which was labelled a green-blue, is lost because of flood protection. And we've identified it differently.
So these, this is the Hutt River scheme, so covering the extent of the scheme, so not bordering onto individual properties. But I think your question is around, or comment is around, if we're not maintaining something that is high risk or low risk and that has a consequence of failure, then what could be the follow up from the public? Is that? I think it goes to the fundamentals of Lucy's report and what the committee is being asked to sign off, that you are satisfied with the information that you have in front of us, that we're maintaining the schemes to a satisfactory standard. I think that's the crux of it, is what you're asking there.
And just to add to that, the fact that we utilise best practice risk management frameworks and asset planning frameworks to manage our assets, to make sure that we're aware of where the high risk is and that we're managing it. So these tables are particularly prepared for governance to be able to provide that sign-off that we are doing that correct job, rather than for the public to understand the specific risk to their individual property. But if they were to contact us, like Alison did, we can talk through that with them as we would for any other constituent ratepayer.
I could just add, that was the key piece of feedback we got last year from this subcommittee, was that they couldn't see that within the report to be able to confidently sign it off. So we went away and did some work and brought back all the information to provide that assurance to the subcommittee that we have the systems and processes in place. Yeah.
And I suppose also to give you some confidence that if you look across New Zealand, this is the New Zealand River Managers Special Interest Group. They are the people that have developed and are continuing to develop this framework so that we can consistently look at the way that flood assets are managed across New Zealand. So we are probably one of the more mature users across New Zealand, but we are definitely driving that consistency. We're managing it in the same way that I suppose, in theory, all councils will be managing our flood assets. Yeah.
Okay, should we let you finish your presentation? Sorry for keeping butting in. We'll try to restrain ourselves.
So moving on from the risk assessment itself, this table just shows the Te Awa Kairangi proposed work programme from the operational teams. So you can see here so we've highlighted along the fourth column along, which areas of risk they're addressing. So they've aligned these work programmes to those areas of risk that we've identified. And this is just the rest of the work programme, but any areas that have been identified through our process have either been addressed through the operational works programme, or there will be investigations planned, or depending on the size of the works required, they will be passed on to the capital works team, and I'll talk about that on my next slide. So these are the areas of high and very high risk. We've also, on the far right hand side, we've got the planned remediations. So I'll just walk you through these briefly. If you have any questions, just let me know. So to go through the very high risk ones, stock banks along Farrison Street and Lower Hutt are rated as very high risk. So these defences are expected to overtop in a 2,800 QMEC design event. And as I've said before, the Riverlink project will mitigate this by retreating, raising and strengthening stock banks in this reach. So it's a good point to note that stage 1 of Mill Street stock banks upgrade has achieved practical completion, but because of when we undertake our annual condition rating process, they haven't been included this year. So you'll see in theory, the risk mitigation come in next year. So you'll see all of those assets, and they'll also be included in all of the asset tables. The River Road stock bank above Moonshine is also rated as very high risk due to limited capacity and average intrinsic strength. And this is also predicted to overtop in a 2,800 QMEC event. So targeted investigations have commenced to better understand the local conditions and develop options for treatment. So if we move on to the areas of high risk, so at Te Awa Kairangi Hutt river mouth, downstream of the estuary bridge, capacity remains the key issue here. So the reach is inundated during a 1,900 QMEC event. So no stock banks are currently planned in this area, but this will be reviewed through the review of the Hutt River Floodplain Management Plan, and they have actually done some initial work through Riverlink, and that will be incorporated in the review. So the reaches from Moera to Strand Park through Alistown are rated as high risk, primarily due to the consequences associated with potential stock bank failure, and that will be addressed through our operational works plan. So in the city centre, including Rutherford Street...
Just a quick question, there's an acronym XS. What does that mean in that Moera one?
Sorry, cross-section. Sorry. Sorry, that was me. Okey-doke. So in the city centre, including Rutherford Street and Harcourt Weary Drive areas, the risk is rated as high. So a prioritisation review of structural works within the Hutt River Floodplain Management Plan is underway, informed by the recently completed Hutt River Flood Hazard Modelling, and that review will guide future investment and implementation sequencing. So further upstream along areas along River Road near Hadatonga Park, Holdsworth Avenue and Moonshine Bridge, Whakatiki Street, Ebden Town and Naitama Park have also been assessed as high risk. So this is due to a combination of the condition of the assets and the high potential consequences of failure. So assets with identified condition issues will be addressed through the operational works plans. And finally, at Gemstone Drive, the stock bank is predicted to overtop during 2,800 QMEC event, so it's high risk, and this will be included in the Hutt River Floodplain Management Plan prioritisation review. And anything with poor condition scores will be addressed through the operational works plan. So now I move on to Wainuiomata. So the latest assessment for the Wainuiomata River has identified 2 areas of high risk. And that's due to the potential for overtopping during that 1% annual exceedance probability event. So in response, an update to the flood hazard model is programmed to commence in 25-26. And following completion of that updated model, investigations will be undertaken to better understand the extent of the risk and identify suitable solutions. And these investigations will inform the development of the options to manage that ongoing risk. So just so that you're aware, here is the operational works plan and how they're going to address those areas. And as you can see, they actually had already identified them before we came along, which is fantastic. It means the system is working. And yeah, they will be, funnily enough, removing trees from critical stock banks is one of their things that they've got on their programme. And the other areas will be remediated. I'm pretty sure it was vegetation as well. So all high-risk areas, just to give you some confidence, are outlined and known to officers already. They're already scheduled for treatment in the floodplain management plans, and technical investigations, operational maintenance plans have already included all of these things, and that also includes our activity management planning and our long-term planning processes. So all of this stuff is covered. So this final table provides a breakdown of our new recorded assets, which includes stock banks, ripraps, willows, groin and one weir. So the reason for some of these is that they were previously undocumented assets. So that's we've had inspectors go out and pick some up that were previously not in the system, and others, such as the willows, are newly constructed. And as I said previously, it's just worth noting that we have 8 additional stock bank assets that have been constructed as part of the Riverlink Stage 1. And these new assets are located between the Transpower substation and Wellington Bridge, and they will be captured in the system in the coming year. So thanks for sticking with me through that wealth of information. And I now request that the subcommittee does the following things. And if you've got any questions, let me know. And thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. As I said at the beginning, I think the concerns we had last year about being able to identify particular critical assets within the overall framework have been thoroughly addressed. So I'm feeling a lot more confident than I was, and from what we see here, we seem to be moving in the right direction in terms of asset protection and maintenance and renewal. Councillor Duthie has one question. My question in this really doesn't fit within the asset discussion, but every now and then, particularly when you're talking about the risks around Te Awa Kairangi, there are places where you identify inherent risk, which sort of means, from what I've judged, that there isn't really anything we think we can do about it. So I just wonder if maybe, I don't know whether here's the right place, but it does seem like that kind of puts it in a bit of a too hard basket, and because we don't have any assets, we're not really addressing it. We're just saying this is an area of inherent risk, and I'm wondering what the strategy is for those particular reaches of the river.
So if we look at that risk matrix, I can pull it back up if that would be useful. The areas of inherent risk, it's just inherently there is a consequence that to people and property and critical infrastructure that will always be there. And we, obviously nobody can tell the future and the effects of climate change, but even with what we do know, you know, our stop banks will only have so much capacity. There is only so much that the system can manage. So that's when you, I suppose in terms of that risk management, you have those emergency action plans in place. You have all of those things just in case our system does fail. But we are, I suppose, to give you confidence, all of those assets are being well maintained. They are being managed. They are known. All of the information about those critical assets is kept in a fantastic system where you can access it. So we're doing everything that we possibly can to mitigate that risk, but we can never inherently take away the risk from flooding.
I just think this is such an important point that it's worth reiterating. If we think about Havelock North, there's a famous picture of the stop bank, so not Havelock North, Taradale stop bank, upgraded to a new capacity months before Cyclone Gabrielle hit and was within an inch of overtopping. So we are only able to provide so much level of protection. We cannot ever completely eliminate the risk. Our public will expect that we are completely eliminating the risk. And the more that we can do to educate ourselves and them about the levels of risk that we provide that service to, and the fact that no matter how good we are, there will always be something bigger that Mother Nature could throw at us. And that's what these represent, that underlying inherent risk.
Councillor Duthie, your question?
Thank you. One question, and then I'd like to speak in debate as well. This is the second year of the long-term plan in which we very deliberately invested more in flood asset maintenance. Are we seeing the tangible benefits of that extra investment in flood maintenance coming through in the asset management? So I mean, you may not have exactly done it, but if we did analyse what this might have been if we hadn't done that maintenance, there is a tangible difference.
Absolutely. We're stretching our memories a little bit, but you probably remember the presentation that we gave where we talked about we could not invest in this, but you would see a decline. We're not seeing that decline. As you have heard, our assets are staying at the same, they're being well maintained, they're staying at the same condition, if not improving in some spaces. I think we have to remember that we have a fantastic flood risk management system as a council. We are a leader in this space. And so the fact that you guys have chosen to maintain that investment in it is fantastic, because we're seeing the benefits of that. None of our assets are degrading. We don't have the issue where our systems are failing us, and yeah, we're definitely seeing the benefits.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Would someone like to move these three? So Councillor Duthie's going to move them. Can someone second them? Councillor Hammond? Excellent. And I've already been pre-warned that Councillor Duthie would like to speak to these motions. We don't often do that, but take it away.
Thank you. So I love this report. It might seem quite hard work to get through the presentation, and certainly hard work to read all the papers, but it's really crucial to the work we do, and I voted against approving this report a couple of times because I wasn't satisfied that I understood it fully and that the essential information was coming through it. And so put a bit of time in it and worked with you. And thank you very much to the staff for working to develop it and reform the presentation to really have the clear messages coming through. So one reason was clarity. I wanted to know what I was agreeing to here. But the other reason was going into the LTP, we were severely fiscally constrained, and we invested a lot extra in flood protection at a time when we really couldn't afford to. And so it behoves us to make sure we see the tangible benefits to the public of that coming through. So I'm very happy to move this, and will be supporting it today because I now understand what it is and think it is a good reflection of us doing our jobs. Nothing's ever perfect. Nothing will ever be all very good, but we're across it. We're trying to deal with it in a prioritised way, and we're understanding risk and its complexity. So thank you.
Councillor Hammond, would you like to speak?
No, just reiterate. Yeah, I agree with him. He said it better than me.
What he said.
What he said.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I should put the motions then. All those in favour? Carried. Passed. Awesome. Thank you, team, so much. Sorry that was a bit arduous to get through, but right. The next item on the agenda is the Moonshine Stock Bank.
Kia ora.
Okay, so we've got the Moonshine Stock Bank options assessment on the table. So it's just for noting, just to provide an update. I am a little concerned that it was a bit light on detail, that there was no detail of the options and why one was selected above the others. So I'm wondering if you can circulate a bit more information following this meeting to give us confidence. Also, did I hear there was some funding that you had been looking at applying to for this project that you now weren't going to apply for, and so that had slowed down the timeline? Well, we were trying to fast track the timeline in order to meet that funding application, but we now don't need to. Is that both correct?
Sure, thanks, Madam Chair. You're seeing a bit of me today, but I'd also just like to introduce Alexander Brotherston, who's put together this report and is project manager for the Moonshine Stock Bank project. So yeah, Alexander, if you want to call him Sandy. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words before we jump into it, but I'll hold your questions if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so I'll take the report as read. It's not very long. Basically the first stage of the project was looking at an options assessment for potential ways to meet the level of service. A multi-criteria analysis was undertaken, which resulted in the preferred option being selected of raising the stock bank in place. That's the work that's been done so far, with the next stage of the project being focused on the feasibility of implementation, the interaction of Moonshine Road and other infrastructure, geotech assessment, and determining the stock bank geometry, implications for operations and maintenance, and a cost estimate. And that stage of the project is due for completion by the end of the calendar year. I can take questions.
When you say the project is due for completion, you mean that the scoping of the options is due for completion?
Correct.
Not that there will be a new stock bank in place by the end of 2020.
That's also correct.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions for it?
Would you like me to speak to your other two roles? Sorry, Councillor Conley, that you had before. Yeah, sure, thanks. So the question regarding more detail that you requested, yes, it was a little bit late. We were hoping that this report would be a little bit further along by the time we presented to the committee. We do have a draft report from the consultant PDP but we've gone back for some further information, which is why we didn't include it as an attachment. So there is some more information there that we'll happily circulate to the committee before the end of the training, because as you say, this is your last meeting. And your question as to funding, I might actually throw that one to Jack. He's probably got a bit more information on it than I do.
Sure, yeah, we were hoping to include this as part of the Crown's regional infrastructure program, but given the degree of uncertainty or lack of shovel readiness that we had around the project, we agreed with Kanoa that we would not submit it. That would have allowed us to access potentially 60% funding, but it does sit outside of the criteria of the fund anyway, because the fund does not support projects in Metro Wellington, defined as the two huts, Porirua and Wellington. So it was a bit of a long shot anyway, but given the pressure that would have put on delivery, we preferred to take our time to make sure we were doing the right work and it was a good investment.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Just for clarity, that the reaches of the river we're talking about is between the Moonshine Bridge and the Whakatiki turnoff. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
So at that point, is State Highway 2 running inside or outside the river corridor, or on top of the stop bank? I don't know. And would there be implications for State Highway 2 in changes to the stop bank?
It does run inside the river corridor. Part of the MCA process looked at complexity of any upgrades, and obviously moving or doing anything with the state highway would be quite complex and expensive, which is one of the reasons that wasn't those options weren't continued forward with. The selected preferred option does not impact on State Highway 2. However, details will be included in part of the next phase of investigation.
Is it likely to impact on the housing that's on the other side of the stop bank?
I don't think so. I think the intention is to have the new stop bank be raised on the current parcel footprint of the existing stop bank.
Awesome. You can see why there are details that it's fairly important for us to be across so that we can answer questions from constituents. So we look forward to that being circulated when you've sorted out the details with the consultant. Any other questions? So that is just for noting. So I think we've all noted it. And thank you very much for your presentation. So we'll move on to item 10, which is the Hutt Valley Flood Risk Management Update. I didn't have any questions on this, so do you want to provide a bit of a anything you want to say in advance?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to take this one as read, and any questions could be answered by myself or my colleagues, because this is a joint effort report.
Anyone got any questions? No. Okay, we will move on. Thank you so much for answering all your questions. Okay, we will move on to Riverlink. So if the Riverlink people want to come up. So if I could start by welcoming you guys to our committee, and just saying that I thought so I had been a little critical of previous reports in that they were quite jargony and quite hard to actually identify what the main progress of Riverlink had been between one meeting and the next. But I think that this report is a lot easier to read and pretty good on clarity in terms of where the project's going and what the main issues are. So take it away.
Thank you, Councillor. Kia ora koutou. This is Robbie. Just to introduce Robbie as our project manager on Mill Street, and of course you all know Tracy. We'll take the paper as read, but I just thought I'd make a couple of points. The first thing is significant progress has been made on the removal of the 33 kV cable relocation. That's a joint investment between the partners, and it's an important activity with respect to the CDP. The good news is the Western Hutt sewer main will be moved from the river corridor as far as the new City Link Bridge, and Greater Wellington and Hutt City are splitting the alliance costs for undertaking this work. Moving the sewer main has the added benefit of allowing us to move the river towards the true right bank and create a bit more space on the very constrained true left bank. And work is underway on a targeted monitoring regime for the aquifer. We're looking to close Melling Bridge to all traffic between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. over 5 consecutive nights from the 12th to the 18th of August, weather permitting, and closure of Block Road in both directions from the 12th to the 21st of August to commence willow removal. The noise associated with that work is going to be managed in accordance with the certified noise vibration management plan, and we're currently drawing up the noise schedule, and that's going to involve mitigations including electric chainsaws for smaller trees and time limitations for noisy petrol chainsaws. The good news is that we are working with Kiwi Rail with full Minister support on a program of work to accelerate and prioritise network renewals on the Hutt Valley line, and that will improve reliability for the train service during construction and assist with congestion and provide non-road transport alternatives. Where the original CDP, which was presented to Council several months ago, is in the process of being tweaked. I've been asked for some updated timeframes, and we can share a little bit more information potentially offline, given that it's an industrial paper-based system at the moment. But the NZCA construction of the interchange is due to commence in October 25, and that will finish in April 31. Melling Station is scheduled to close in December 25, and that will go till December 28, depending on the City Link Bridge construction. The true left bank stop bank construction from Countdown to Ewan Bridge is due to start in May 26 and go to January 28. The City Link Bridge construction starts in January 27 and goes to December 28, and the true right bank stop bank construction starts in January 28. So Tracy has prepared a visual photo or visual update on a photograph, and we'll just have to work out how we get you guys across that.
I can highlight some things.
Yeah. And if you could just send us out an email with those key dates,
Absolutely.
and that would be much appreciated. I'm seeing nodding. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Would you like a little bit more information on those timeframes, or should we get to questions now?
I think, I don't know about other people, but I'm probably having difficulty retaining those timeframes without it being written down. So if there's any more salient points you want to include when you email that out, that would be much appreciated.
No problem at all. Yep. So we can open the floor to questions.
Cool. Okay, who has questions of the team?
I have a question.
Councillor Duthie?
It was a question I asked Tracy anyway and had a great answer, thank you, but I think it's worth explaining the need to close Melling Bridge to all traffic, cars, overnight for a period of weeks or days or something, to chop down some trees was sort of counterintuitive from a public perspective. Why would you need to close a road bridge that goes over the top of the trees in order to cut down the tree? So I think just explaining that the safety aspect and why that is the case is useful to hear.
Are we on? Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to pass it to Robbie, but if I may, I'm going to answer Councillor Edwards' question around the 140 year. So in effect, yes, it's the same definition, except that when I describe it, I use more of a layman's term. So that's why when I looked at it, I just needed to check. So it's how I describe it is 1 in 440 with climate change out to 100 year. What Lucy did was fill in all those technical gaps around it. So she confirms that it's the same thing. So Simon, keep going. But Robbie, if you could explain, because you're in the thick of it in terms of managing that job.
Yep. So the key issue with the trees is the proximity to the bridge, and we're not just removing the tree; we're actually repurposing an asset. So the willow tree has to be relocated in its entirety. So if we were to sectional fell it, we wouldn't have to close the bridge where we take it down in small bits, but we want the whole tree. So the whole tree is 25 metres tall. It's within 2 tree lengths of the bridge. So under regulation, you can't fell the tree in one swoop without having that bridge isolated from traffic. And there is no way we could have that traffic management happen during the day because of the volumes. So we're then forced to move to night. Nobody wants to use chainsaws at night, but that's the reality if we want to repurpose the asset. And the reason we're repurposing the assets is the mature willows that we have along the river corridor are reused as bioengineering, where we lie them down and they become a nature-based erosion protection to our berms in the upper reach.
So I was going to ask where they're going to be moved to, but also how do you transport them when they're that big? Are you using a crane?
Great difficulty. And at
just being nosy now, but
expense. So yes, we've started an earthworks project behind Belmont School, and we are lowering a section of berm about 300 metres long that will go down to our design level, and then we will move the trees from around Melling Bridge up, bring them across the river in the back of a dump truck at a minimum length of 13.5 metres each, and then gently place them in a trench in bundles of 10 to 15 trees, packeted together, tied together with manila rope, which is biodegradable, and then anchored in using posts that we manufacture from the willows on site, so that we have a fully biodegradable and regenerative edge protection that provides immediate protection, and it's sort of, in layman's terms, like slightly less robust but more nature-based rock protection.
Cool. So that the movement of those will happen at night as well?
No, we'll just fell, and then a day crew will come in and move them during the day.
Yep. Councillor Lewis?
How long do you expect that work to take at night? Will it be all night long or?
Yes, when we close for night, we'll use the whole shift. We've currently suggested a closure of up to 5 nights. We don't believe we will take all 5 nights, but you never know if you're going to get weather delays or high winds that stop you from felling. So we've allowed for 5 nights, but we're quietly confident we'll be able to do it in less than that.
Fascinating. Okay, other questions? I have a couple. So my ones are specifically on the consent non-compliance that you mentioned 2 instances of consent non-compliance. So if you can tell us a bit more about what happened and the process that you undertook. But then my major question, and I'm sure others were thinking the same thing, is around the issue of contaminated land that you've raised in the paper. You noted essentially that some significant contamination had been discovered and that it would be very costly to dispose of it to landfill, and you're going to cap it. I'm familiar with capping contaminated land in areas of hazard, but generally it's like parks that then kids play soccer on top. It's not in the middle of an active floodplain. So I'm wondering if you can please give us assurance that this is actually an appropriate way of managing contaminants, and are we sure that we shouldn't be paying to have them disposed of correctly at a landfill?
I can address both of those items. To start with the contaminated land, I think you used the word significant contamination. It's not significant contamination. So what we found is lightly contaminated soils when we've been excavating out for a rockline, R3. The rockline location, if you look at the historical photos, is in an area that used to be a concrete plant. So we found some fragments of asbestos, but unlike what people sort of think of when you hear of contaminated land, we haven't found a bunch of old asbestos pipes or sheets or anything like that. We've been testing what looks, and if you go out, I can send photos, but the photos just look like soil. There is no visible signs of contamination. We've done some tests, which are a requirement before we send to clean fill, to to check for contaminants, and we have found light levels of asbestos and some heavy metals.
Now you note that I see that I read that paragraph wrong. That paragraph does include the word significant on 2 occasions, and I linked the significance to the contamination. But clearly now I read it again. That wasn't what you intended, so thank you for clarifying that.
The significance, I suppose, comes from the fact that when you deal with contaminated material, there is no, a landfill that receives it doesn't have a different rate that it charges you financially for the level of contamination. It's just contamination and it's done on weight. Soil's extremely heavy. So if you have a lot of soil that is deemed contaminated, which this is, even though it's very lightly contaminated, it is an excruciatingly expensive exercise to bring it to a Class A facility, and it's actually a terrible environmental outcome. Class A facilities are rare and precious resources that should be reserved for the most nasty waste that we produce as a species. Putting lightly contaminated topsoil into a landfill is actually a pretty poor environmental outcome. The contaminants we're talking about, asbestos, is naturally occurring and doesn't naturally leach by itself. It leaches if you put it around organic material that breaks down, turns into liquid and moves. There's lots of that in landfills. There's not lots of that in the area we're proposing to put it. Where we are proposing to put it, yes, it is in the river corridor, but we've identified an area where we've assessed the hydraulic movement of the area. It is in an existing registered slur site, so it is already a deemed contaminated site on the other side of the river. The design we've put in is a gentle slope, so a 1 in 50 slope back from the river. It is set back 50 metres from the river edge. That river edge is receiving rockline protection, so minimum risk of erosion and therefore remobilisation of the material, and it'll be capped with topsoil. So as far as a health outcome and an environmental outcome, retaining on site is by far the most appropriate approach.
Good answer. Is everyone satisfied with that? Okay, tell us about the non-compliance. One of them might have been the contaminant. Was that about finding low levels of contaminants? Paragraph 19. Responses to regulators completed for 2 non-compliance, one of releasing sediment and the other for not promptly notifying the regulator about finding low levels of contaminants.
Yep, so that contamination that we're dealing with now is one of those items. So we found the material, and what we've done when we come across positive test results but no visible sign of contamination is we go through a process where we get a suitably qualified environmental practitioner to come out on site. So for us, that is a consultancy called Hale Environmental. They are contamination experts. They come out on site and they effectively give us the determination that yes, this is contaminated material, and yes, you have to activate your processes under accidental discovery and do what you need to do. The regulator has asked us to explain why we didn't tell them about this material on the day that we got a positive test result. So I can't remember the exact dates, but I believe we got a positive test result on a Thursday, and we told the regulator about it the following Wednesday. And between the Thursday and the Wednesday, we were working with our suitably qualified environmental practitioner to confirm that the material we are dealing with is actually to be deemed contaminated land. Because as I've said, you look at it, there's no sign of contamination, it's topsoil. And the reason we wanted to be sure that we did that check with our practitioner before we notified the regulator is we had previously had a hit for asbestos and done a similar check, and then effectively the SQEP had concluded that it could have been a mix-up in the lab, or it could have been some other material, but he effectively certified that the material was clean. So we wanted to rule out the fact that this material was clean before we notified of it being contaminated.
So we did do some additional testing. And
what was the risk of notifying the regulator ahead of having confirmation?
Possibly low, and we've already, in our response to the regulator, said going forward, we're happy to let you know immediately as we encounter material that we are dealing with potentially contaminated material, and we'll come back and confirm one way or another. So that's effectively what we're going to do from now on. Our view was that we were dealing with a material that was relatively well managed. We were dealing with it in accordance with what our processes and approved contaminated land management plans suggested we do. So we didn't see a need to notify the regulator until we had confirmed it was contaminated material. But we've acknowledged that in our response to say, obviously they have a different opinion, and going forward we will change our process.
Who was the regulator? Was Greater Wellington
Hutt
or
City.
Hutt City? I mean, so I'll get you to explain the sediment in a minute, but I mean, we need to be better in this regard, because with the sediment, it no doubt would have been us that was the regulator that we were that we were complaining, or that we were notifying to. So we need to be squeaky clean on in our environmental matters, because we need to set an example for everyone else doing construction projects around the region, and it speaks to our legitimacy and our social license. So it would be my recommendation that we notify as soon as possible, even if there's a risk that we can backtrack and later conclude that it wasn't actually contaminated. But if that's what the regulator expects, then we need to comply with that 100%. Do you want to just provide a little bit of context on the sediment?
Yes. So just a little bit of background. So the way our consent is structured and how we manage the works is we have a large consent that was provided at the consenting of the project, but the level of detail and design was immature, so effectively a lot of the controls got kicked to management plan setup. So we have a suite of management plans, and then we have a suite underneath that of site-specific management plans. So as we go through, we do site-specific erosion and sediment control management plans for specific pieces of work. For the piece of work that we currently have underway, which is rockline installation, Greater Wellington Riverlink team took on to complete the site-specific erosion sediment control management plan, and effectively put that as a contractual requirement to our contractor to do the works in accordance with the site-specific erosion sediment control management plan. And then the regulator, so we have joint inspections every 2 weeks from the regulators, being GW and Hutt City. They come out and they do compliance audits to check that we're in accordance with the consent, in accordance with our management plans and our erosion site control plans. And on the 11th of June, I believe, an inspection was undertaken in the afternoon, and the site was found to be deficient with control relative to the certified site-specific erosion sediment control management plan. And everybody on site that day witnessed a discharge that was happening at the rockline L3 on the left bank of the river. So that was a failure. Failures in the consent, there is a process under which failures are reported. So we have what's called a 101 report, which is after our condition 101, and well, basically as failures occur, we self-report and we investigate and provide that back to the regulator. So we immediately started that process, but obviously it was discovered by us at the same time it was discovered by the regulator. We immediately started that process. We instructed our contractor to get the works back in accordance with the site-specific erosion sediment control management plan, which they promptly went and did. On the 13th, which was the Friday of that week, we issued to the regulators an interim response document, which basically says we completely acknowledge that the works that you witnessed 2 days ago were not in accordance with the erosion sediment control plan. We have taken action to remediate that. We've deployed rapid stabilisation, stabilised the site. Here is the condition of the site now. And then subsequently to that, the regulator has asked us for please explain. to document further what has gone on there, and has asked that of ourselves and our contractor, and we have both independently responded to that to provide further detail as to how that came to occur. But effectively, on the in the broad brush, how did it happen? Works were being done not in accordance with the Erosion Sediment Control Management Plan. We had too much area open, and it was an extremely rainy day. We actually had a flood event that inundated the whole site that evening, a couple of hours after the inspection had finished. So the controls were put under additional pressure by heavy rain. There was too much area open, and a discharge occurred. Just on the discharge, though, we have part of our process is if we do have a discharge, we consult with an ecologist, and if required, they inspect the site within 28 to 48 hours notice. And we have consulted with an ecologist on this one, and their response was that a discharge of this order in an isolated event is not something that would warrant, immediate remedial action or anything like that. It's more that it shouldn't have happened. We should learn from it, and we can't have those ongoing discharges.
Just in terms of learning from it, was there anything we could do in terms of improved contract management or oversight that would prevent this from occurring in future?
Yep. So we've taken a series of steps. There was an element to this that the contractor was under some time pressure, which is fact. There was a time pressure on the contractor. We had quite a lot of rain delays, and a lot of the rockline work that we do is dependent on river levels, and the river has been quite elevated for some time, which has meant that the program has elongated and things have taken longer. So one of the things we've made clear to our contractor is, yes, there is a contract at play. Yes, you have requirements upon you on quality, time, and cost, but they cannot trump environmental protection. So one of the things that we've landed with the contractor is an agreement to an extension of time to alleviate some of that pressure that can creep in and cause some poor outcomes. And as well as that, we've put in some additional controls. So we have a independent erosion sediment control specialist who we engaged to draw up the ESEP initially. We've now furthered her scope, and she conducts independent audits on our behalf, as well as the regulators audits that are underway.
That sounds really, really good, and I wonder if we could look to expand the sediment audit to other flood management tasks that we do. That's really positive outcome. Cool. Any other questions from anyone else? Councillor Duffy.
Paragraph 20 mentions the annual report for Greater Wellington Works is in preparation. Is that meaning information about the Riverlink project for the Greater Wellington's annual report, or is that a specific annual report that you prepared about your work?
It's a specific annual report which we do for our work across, so it will include this, it will include all the other work we've done this year, and that's in preparation, so due to go in very shortly.
Who's that annual report to?
To the regulator.
Right. So yeah, our consent condition 127 and 128 require reporting on a regular basis. So one of them is a quarterly report, and one of them is an annual report.
I'm just wondering if would you put the annual report up on the website, or is that just an internal document?
Well, we don't, but we can.
Oh no, I'm keen to see. I probably don't need to see the quarterly report, but I'm keen to see the annual report. Cool. Any other questions? No, I think we're done. Thank you, team. Now I understand in the next room you've got a map with stickies on it that also helps explain some of the timeline stuff. So at the conclusion of this meeting, go through and take a look at that if you want. Cool, okay, I think that is Riverlink done. So the final item on the agenda is the flood plain management plan implementation report. That's Tina again. Oh no, we haven't seen Tina today. There's quite a lot in here that is somewhat repetitious of other items that we've already discussed in great length. So do you want to, there was one in particular item that you raised with me, Jack, that you wanted to highlight, which I now can't remember what it was.
I too can't remember what it was, wasn't it?
Anything you want to highlight, Tina?
Nothing specific. This is a collection or a collaboration between officers within Environment Group, but basically a consolidated report on everything that we've reported through the year up until the 30th of June 2025.
Just quickly having a wee squiz through to see if I can find. I'm sure Jack pointed out something, but I can't recall what it was now. So, yes, it was the NZTA.
Yeah, that was actually in a previous report that we took as read, but just that we found the NZTA had done some drainage work on the foot of the stop bank along or opposite Poets Park, and so we've had to follow up with them about with some advice on whether or not that's actually going to affect the integrity of the stop bank, and work that might be needed to make sure the stop bank retains that integrity. Just say NZTA, we're not sure if contrite is the right word, but have agreed to remediate any damage that might have caused, and there's some discussion underway about how they can make sure that they just don't do work without informing us on our assets. It's not in this report, but just under our incident management, it's probably worth drawing some attention to an incident that occurred a couple of months ago where our incident management team were able to respond quickly to an unsecured bridge in Wainuiomata that we became aware of, and that could have basically, in the flood that was coming, flooded downstream and taken a chunk out of the stop bank and flooded houses. And so just to back up the value of having emergency management systems in place, is our team were able to very quickly respond to that and secure it on site. So even beyond the structure elements that we often focus on, things like flood incident management and good flood operations teams can be worth their weight in gold in flood events. So it's not in the reports, but I think it was such a cool incident, it was worth telling you about.
So, if anyone else have any other questions for Tina? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Tina. I don't know if this is for you. It might be for the chair and for the future. I just know with Kiwi Rail, we've got work going on the Ava Bridge, and I wanted to know about if GW will be working on the stop bank there when the bridge goes in. So it might be for future reporting because it hasn't started yet.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So we do tend to, when we're working in areas where we have the likes of Kiwi Rail and Wakakotahi in and around, we will make sure that we sequence that appropriately. We have originally were told that Kiwi Rail was doing some work at the start of this calendar year. It's now being deferred a little bit further. So we'll continue to stay in contact to make sure that we're kept up to date with their timelines as well.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Tina. Just before we wrap up, I believe that this is the last Te Awa Kairangi Subcommittee of this triennium. And so for everyone who is standing for re-election, good luck. And I might see you. I'm already elected, so what can you do? Just in terms of this committee, I will send out an email because there have been a number of things through today's meeting that I will ask the staff to follow up on. So I'll send out an email just collating all that stuff. But also I will ask you just to consider, what your reflections on how the committee's run and how we can improve it for next triennium. So have a think about what you would like to see on the agenda and how you would like this committee to morph, I guess. I was really keen that it develop more of a catchment management focus, and we did that a little bit this training. It did take on a bit of a new catchment flavour, but there's more that we can do in that area if that's something that you guys think is valuable. So, yeah, I will send out that email and send me your feedback back. But yeah, good luck for everyone, and I will close us with the closing karakia that the staff aren't going to put up. Sorry. That's all right. Unahia, unahia ki te ura tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, tināku, tinana, te wairua I te ara takata, koe rā I rongo, whakairea aki ki runga, kia tina, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you very much.